Hello, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Allie, and today I'm going to be doing my reads of, what was last month? April. So this is my first time doing this on this channel. I used to do it on my beauty channel very sporadically. Obviously, I would like to make this a normal series. If you notice that there is space right here, it's because most of the books I read are from my local library or from Audible. So I'll put the picture of the book so that you can get a frame of reference. But yeah, I'm not going to dilly-dally. I am going to go ahead and get started. But I did just want to let you know, I don't do full reviews of books because I feel like it's not the time and place. I just kind of tell you whether I think it's good or not, what I rated it on GOODREADS, and yeah, like if I'd recommend it. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first book I read for April was from the Warrior series by Erin Hunter. If you're not familiar with her, which actually, did I not put my, yeah, okay. So she has these series of books that are about these feral cats living in the forest. And I know that sounds really stupid. I thought it sounded really stupid. I do read a lot of J fiction because I'm a children's, sorry, there's like something under me. I am a librarian, so I like to be able to recommend books to children. And I ended up becoming addicted to this series. And the warriors are like these cats that live in the forest and they protect the forest. There's very much like metaphorical undertones of like climate change, politics, like race relations, being different, ableism. Like this book covers a lot if you're an adult, but obviously if you're a child, it's just like about cats. So I finished book number 6, which is The Darkest Hour, and it's the last book in the, there's like different series, if that makes sense. Kind of like how Cassandra Clare does like Mortal Instruments, there's like spin-offs. That's how this is. I think these were like the New Prophecy or something like that. Or maybe the next one is New Prophecy. I can't remember exactly, but this is number 6. It's in order. If you look on, like if you Google her and you look at the books in order, this is the 6th one in that order by publication date. And I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was so good, such a good way to end that particular set of that series. I love her character building. Like she manages to write animals like perfectly. It's just crazy. And she does really good with action because technically these are teen and J fiction books. They're classified differently kind of everywhere you go. My local library that I use classifies them as J, but the library that I work in classifies half of them in J and half of them in teen, so it just kind of depends. But these do deal with a lot of like adult like issues. They're so good. Like if you have a kid in middle school or high school that's into animals, into cats, these are such good books, and they're just such good introductions to some of our like everyday issues that we don't really think about. So that was the first book I finished. I finished it on April 1st. I tend to read these, like I will start them and finish them the same day because I love them. So yeah, that was the first book that I finished. Alright, so book number 2 that I read was Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. It's Todd Family number 1, so I guess this is going to be a series. I listened to this on Audible. It was the big book of the month for the Emily Fox Buddy Read book club that I'm in. If you don't watch Books with Emily Fox, you definitely should. I'll link her down below if I remember. She's amazing. She's like my favorite booktuber ever. But I have to say, I wasn't into this book. I felt, at least listening to it, I felt like it was very hard to follow the characters. I felt like it was very hard to keep up with. It definitely, so it's about someone living their life over and over again. And it was really cool because it's a historical fiction book, which I will say isn't my genre, but it took place like World War II-ish era, World War I. And I had trouble, like it wasn't until halfway through the book I was like, oh, like she's dying and coming back to life. Like it really was hard to keep up with, and I almost felt like it would be worth a reread for me. Like I want to read it with a physical book because I just didn't feel like I got a lot out of it. I did give it 3 stars because I did end up finishing it like within a couple of days. I did listen to it on a trip though, so that's probably why. But I just didn't feel like I liked it and can recommend it. I give books 3 stars that like I finished really quickly but didn't like, or like I finished and had like a ton of problems with, but I didn't hate it. So that's kind of like 3 stars is definitely middle ground for me. Yeah, wasn't a fan. I do want to continue the series though. I do have the second book checked out. in God's Land or something like that, and it tells the story of her brother. But I wasn't into it, and I almost didn't get the point. Like, I felt like maybe this book was like too smart for me or something, because I felt like I didn't get what the point of her living all these lives was, because she wasn't learning anything. This is kind of a spoiler, so I will say, like, spoiler alert, like, you know, pause or go through this video if you don't want that. But there's a moment when she's raped and she gets pregnant, which is like horrible. It's like very traumatic. And she stays friends with her rapist, not only in that life, but in other lives. And I feel like, obviously, like, it's the author's issue, but I was like, why would you write that book that way? Like, I just didn't get it. Like, it just wasn't something that I understood. And it bothered me throughout the whole book. So that was something else, too, that kind of skewed the way I saw things. But I gave it 3 stars. I don't know if I'd recommend it. I definitely wouldn't listen to it, though. The next book I read was a graphic novel. I'm always conflicted about whether I should talk about graphic novels and really short J books, but I'm going to talk about them only briefly. I still count them on GOODREADS, but just, you know, remember that, like, I don't read that many of them, so they possibly take up maybe 10% of my entire, like, GOODREADS goal for the year. So I still count them, but some people may have issues with that. But I read Rumple Buttercup, A Story of Bananas, Belonging, and Being Yourself by Matthew Gray Gubler, and I loved it. I thought it was just like such a cute story. I give it 5 stars. The character Rumple Buttercup was just so cute, and it is like very small. Like, I finished it in 20 minutes. Like, it was super, super tiny. But yeah, I think, like, if you have kids, it's considered an adult book, I believe, but if you have kids, I think this would be a good book for them. Just about, like, belonging, being yourself, all that stuff. So I'm not going to delve too deeply into it because there's not really a big analysis that I can give of it, but it was really good. I enjoyed it. The same with the next one. I have a lot of, again, I'm a children's librarian, or a librarian, I deal with kids. So the I Survived books are really popular. So I decided to pick one up and read it. I was really bored, and I read through it in 2 seconds. It literally took me, I think, 30 minutes or something. It was 80 pages. And it was The Attacks of September 11th, 2001. It's I Survived number 6 by Lauren Tarshis. They have tons of these books. There's I Survived, like, tons of different catastrophic events. And I can't say I enjoyed it, but, like, I understand why kids would like these. And I think it gives kids, like, a really good kind of example into historical fiction, and also gives them, like, a good introduction to, like, catastrophic events. I think The Attacks, you know, September 11th is, like, too fresh. There was a review that I really liked of it, and I wanted to, and obviously it's fictitious, like, it's based on true events, but it's fiction. But there was a review I saw that I really felt like said a lot about how I felt, but I can't find it now, so it might not have even been on GOODREADS. But it was basically just saying, like, that the way it was written was very cliche, and they could have done a lot better, which of course they could. But anyway, I ended up giving it, I gave it 4 stars, so I didn't give it a bad rating at all. 4 stars is pretty average for me. Like, if I enjoy a book, like, I will give it 4 stars. But yeah, if you have kids and you want to introduce them to historical fiction or any sort of fictitious event, that's, like, a really good book for them. It's like middle age, but for, like, higher elementary, middle school. All right, another J book, but this one was longer, so don't panic. This would be more for, like, 8th, 9th, 7th grade, and it was a Disney book. It was called Far From Agrabah. It was by Aisha Saeed, which I thought was amazing because it was actually by an author of, you know, Middle Eastern descent, which is, like, amazing because, you know, how whitewashed is Aladdin always. So the representation there was, like, amazing. I ended up giving the book 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 stars because it did take me a second to get through. There were moments where I was like, okay, what is the point of this? But I really love the Disney retellings that Disney puts out. They do this frequently. I read another one at some point. But it's basically just when they take a core story and they put a different story into it that, like, wasn't included in the movie or the books or anything like that. And this one is when they go to the fictitious land that Aladdin is the king of. Is it Agrabah? I can't remember. Yeah, it's Agrabah, right? So he gets Genie to come up with the fictitious land, and he takes Jasmine there on the magic carpet ride. And once they get there, it's just filled with adventure. He actually ends up telling her the truth, I think, which I found really interesting, because obviously it's a retelling, so it's not, you know, they can do whatever they want. But it was a really good story. I think it was really well written. The characters were... Don't know how long that wasn't recording. I wish there was like a noise that it made. But anyway, it was very nostalgic for me, but also just a really good retelling. So enjoyed that a lot. I found it to be very, very enjoyable. The next book that I read was called Kilman Creek. It's in the Stillhouse Lake series. It's thriller. By the way, I haven't made a video about my goals because it's a little late into the year to do all that, but I do have reading goals. One of my reading goals is to finish books in a series when I start it, which is why you'll notice there's a lot of series books in my monthly reads. That might seem boring, but it's just kind of a thing that I'm doing. So that way, if I don't like a series, I can go ahead and finish it. Or if I really like a series, I can, you know, go ahead and finish it. So the Stillhouse Lake series, I began it last year, I think, and it's just this like thriller series about this woman named Gwen, whose husband is a serial killer, and he's in jail, and she's on the run, and part of her on the run is she works, it's like kind of cheesy, she works with hackers that help her hide her identity, but it turns out those hackers are actually working for her husband. Her husband breaks out of prison, comes after her. It's a whole big thing. So no spoilers, because I feel like if I say anything else, I'll begin to spoil the series. And even though it's cheesy, and I'm aware of its cheesiness, it's actually a really good series. And so I read number 2 this month, and I gave it 4 stars. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's a daughter, and her name is, I don't remember, Lena, something like that. She was so annoying. The first book, I actually liked the son. I didn't think he was annoying at all. And he's annoying in this story. But they actually also did a really good job of representation, at least in my opinion, in this book. They have characters of color. There's a trans woman in the book, and her daughter ends up, spoiler, ends up being gay, which I find really, like, I don't know, just for a thriller. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's done particularly well, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction where things are just kind of organically happening. And the trans character, like, it was just mentioned kind of in passing that the character was trans, and then that was it. Like, it wasn't this huge thing. And I don't know, I really, really enjoyed this book. I'm enjoying the series. The new one's already out, I believe, so I'm going to put myself on hold for it and then get that one as well so I can read it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. The next book I listened to, it was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I expected to enjoy it, but I kind of expected it to be very like chick-lit-y. I expected it to just be kind of a fun read, and it's so much more than that. Like, I mean, I feel like this is obvious. I'm so late to the game with this. I feel like there's people screaming at the screen that are like, yeah, like, we know. But it discusses, obviously, race issues, class issues. It made me, I mean, not that I'm saying that I feel like this is like a good representation of Asian culture, because I honestly don't know. I'm not Asian. But I feel like it was a look into a society that I can't even fathom. Like, money-wise, race-wise, culture-wise, just things that I don't understand, but it was so interesting to read about in this context. And it also told these little side stories. Like, I definitely expected it to just be a story about Rachel and Nick, and it ended up being about so many other people, and I was so invested in all their stories. So I really loved it. The imagery was amazing. And yeah, I loved this book. Like, I will definitely continue the series. I thought it was so good. I haven't watched the movie yet, because A Star is Born literally broke me, and I haven't had the courage to watch anything else. So yeah, I loved this book. Highly recommend it. Okay, I discovered a new author this month. Generally speaking, I'm not a chick lit person. I did read a lot of, like, I don't want to call them chick lit, but like, I didn't read a whole lot of smart books this month, I will admit. I read none of the books for my Read Harder challenge. Like, I did not do well in that front, but I read a lot of like chick lit, and I discovered some new things. So I discovered this author because this elderly woman comes into the library and calls the library, and she's always asking for Kristen Hanna's books. Someone had recommended it to her, and I've heard of Kristen Hanna before because she wrote The Nightingale. And so I was finally like, I'm just going to read a book. And I pulled the only one we had on the shelf. And I actually pulled it because it needed to be discarded. And I decided to read it before I did. And the book was called Homefront. And it's a story about Michael and Jolene. Michael is a big-time attorney in Seattle. And then Jolene actually works for the National Guard. And they're both in their 40s. They have two little girls. And their marriage is like crumbling around them. And just in the midst of all of this, Jolene gets deployed to Iraq. And she's been in the National Guard for a really long time. She actually joined the military because she had a really horrible childhood. And so she joined the military. She'd never been deployed before. And literally in her 40s, she gets deployed to Iraq. So it's this man struggling to raise his children. Jolene doesn't have any parents. Michael only has his mom. And it's a story about family, definitely. It's a story about marriage, and like, it's a story about friendship. Like, I was completely blown away by this book. I was completely taken by surprise at how much I loved it. And then you'll see when I talk about next month, I've already read another Kristen Hanna book this month, and I loved it. And I'm just blown away by like how much I love her books. And it's because she writes not chick lit that you would expect. Like, I would not call it romance. It's like darker than that. Like her books so far have just completely blown me away. So Homefront was so good. I can't say anything else without spoiling it. But I will say, like, one of the last things Michael says to Jolene before she deploys is like, I don't love you anymore. And so they have to contend with that for the entire 9-month deployment. So I gave this one 5 stars. Like, I couldn't put it down. It made me cry. It was so good. And I'm not a mother, but like, I feel like I just really related to a lot of what was going on in the story. And it's funny because I went home for a funeral a few weeks ago. It was like not the best way to go home, but I was going through, my parents have like kind of a mini library in their house because both my parents love to read. Both my like late mom and then my dad love to read, and then my stepmom loves to read. And I was going through the books and I found Kristen Hanna books like in the library, and they had like my mom's name in them. I actually have one, so this is like a spoiler for this month. And it was funny because I had just called, like after I finished Homefront, I called Adair, which is my stepmom, and I was like, you need to read these books. And she was like, okay, like I'll download some of them. But then I went home, and my mom always signed her name in the books and dated when she read it. And it's a Kristen Hanna book, and she had a ton of them. And I was like, holy crap, I never would have like even guessed. So she liked Kristen Hanna too, which I thought was so nice. But anyway, loved it. You will probably be seeing a lot because she has a lot of books, and I've just checked out all of them. So yeah. And then The Great Alone is actually on my list. It's for the year. It's part of my Goodreads challenge. So yeah, that was Homefront. Really loved it. Gave it 5 stars. So the next book I read was called Midnight. It's by Aaron Hunter. It's the New Prophecy series. It's a spinoff of the Warriors series. This one, it tells a story from a different perspective. The Star Clan gets a new prophecy, and they're kind of dealing with this prophecy in this book. And I'll admit, I wasn't a big fan of it, and I was not alone in that. I feel like a lot of people said like this book was not as good as the other ones. This is book number 1 in New Prophecy. I'll obviously continue the series, but I did give it 3 stars because I had trouble getting through it. It ultimately ended fine, but I felt like this story just dragged, and I haven't felt like that with any of the other Warriors books except for the 3rd one in the Warriors series, like the original. I think it was the 3rd or 4th one. I felt like it just dragged. This one I felt that way too, so I was kind of disappointed in that, but not enough that I won't continue the series. But that was the next book I read. I don't even know how many books I read for this month. I'll get my total at the end, I guess. I think I only have a few more books to talk about. Actually, I only have 2 more books to talk about. So yeah, I didn't love that one. I read that one physically. The next book I read was one that I was really excited about. It's called Women Talking by Miriam Toews. Toews. This one was really hyped up for me. My friends told me about it. I started doing some reading about it. It's about a Mennonite clan. The Mennonite women are holding a secret meeting because for the past 2 years, the women have all been getting raped by the men of the colony. They've been like spraying, they've been drugged, and then the men have been breaking into their house and raping them. And I don't think they realized it until one of the 3-year-olds or something got raped as well. And they were like, no. So it's them holding this secret meeting, trying to figure out whether they're going to fight, leave, or just stay and forget about everything. So it all takes place within this meeting. I ended up giving this 4 stars because I did thoroughly enjoy it. But I will say I felt like there were parts that were kind of confusing. Like I couldn't keep up with who was writing it, who was talking, and things like that. So that was one part of it that I was kind of like, okay, like I'm having trouble with this. Again, it's a very smart book, and sometimes I feel like things are too smart for me. But I kind of had trouble with that. And then I was a little bit frustrated with certain parts of the book, and I think part of that comes from just like being overly sheltered. Like I did not come from a super religious family, so part of me was like, why is this so hard? Like just leave, like why is this so difficult? But I feel like that's really easy for me to say. I'm coming from like a very privileged perspective, so I kind of felt bad about that. But ultimately, I did really enjoy this book. I felt like it was really good. I think it definitely lived up to the hype. It was beautifully written. It's very short. I finished it super fast. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I felt like, again, it lived up to the hype. So if you have a chance, I would definitely put yourself on the hold list or buy it or whatever. And it's, the part of this that is like the reason I wanted to read it was because it's based on a true story. I forgot to mention that. So even crazier. So yeah, I did enjoy it. I thought it was very well written, and I think this is her first book, I think. But anyway, really enjoyed it. And the last book, I want to do a whole video on this book because I don't want to say I didn't enjoy it, but so, okay, the book is The Fireman by Joe Hill. And I will say the premise was so good. It's about this disease. It's an apocalyptic disease, obviously. It's called dragon scale. It gives people these like dragon scale tattoos, and it causes people to like combust from the inside out. Some people. And it's about these groups of people that have learned to control the dragon scale. But they're dealing with a society that doesn't want people that have dragon scale like within their society. So the main characters are John, who's the fireman, and then Harper Grayson, who's a nurse. And while I loved the premise of it, first of all, Joe Hill also wrote Nosferatu, and Nosferatu is so much better than this book. I don't think he has issues with female characters. Like, I actually think he writes female characters really well, which is rare for a man. And I think he has really good ideas. But I had one core main issue with this, and maybe I should do a video on it, or maybe I should just rant about it here. I don't know. But I think I'm not alone in saying that I have issues with animal violence. Like, I just do. Which is fine. But I feel like a lot of authors do this thing where there's animal violence in a book just for the effect and for nothing else. So I'm going to give a spoiler, and in advance, like, I'm going to apologize. Like, if you don't want the spoiler, then click out this video. This last book I'm talking about. But there's this moment where Harper Grayson's ex-husband Jake, they've been chasing after them, and on their way to their final destination, they find this cat, and one of the women, Renee, I believe is her name, thinks it's her cat. So she brings it onto the fire truck with them, and the fire truck gets into an accident, and Harper finds the cat alive and is like, wow, like you've made it through all of this stuff. It's not Harper's cat, it's Renee's. Jake has no emotional significance to Renee, so no relationship. Jake comes out of nowhere and kills the cat, and Harper is obviously upset about it, but like isn't that upset about it. And later when Renee asks about the cat and asks if she makes it, Harper just says no, and Renee is obviously upset. But Renee has already lost the love of her life, her clan, the clan that she'd been with since she found out she had dragon scale, and all of her friends. While on the other hand, Harper gets, you know, she has the love of her life is still alive. Her ex-husband, who isn't the love of her life, but still is still alive. All of her friends are still alive. She's getting ready to have a baby. So Harper has lost literally nothing. And Renee, the one character who had one thing on this earth left, was that cat. And it gets killed. And I felt like the only reason that they did that was just to be like, you know, just for effect, just as another bad thing that Jake did. And Jake has already done so many bad things. Like he's killed people. He's literally an exterminator of people with dragon scale. He's killed children. Like he's not a good person. He tried to kill Harper when he found out Harper was pregnant because he didn't want her to have the baby. So we know he's a bad person without him killing an animal. And I know people think that this has to be just because I'm a cat person and that I love cats, and it's not. I have read other books with animal violence in them and not given it this harsh of a critique. It just pisses me off because I feel like I'm not exaggerating when I say I have no interest in reading any other Joe Hill book. And I know that that's mean, but it's because that writing technique, like, do better. Like, that is not something you had to do. It was only done for effect. And it's just such a male fucking thing to do. Like, it pisses me off. Like, it made my blood boil. I wanted to stop reading the book because it just pissed me off. I think that is something that talentless people do when they don't know how to write any other thriller, if they don't know how to write characters, if they don't know how to do plot. They do things like that. They use that as a plot device. And it's just stupid. Like, it's just so dumb. And it's all for effect. It's all to be able to be like, well, I write these thrillers and I don't hold back. Well, you don't have to hold back, but you also don't have to kill animals for no reason. And that's truly like what happened. Even Joe Hill's dad, Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. Stephen King has animal violence in his book. I had just read Pet Sematary the month before, and I didn't have issues with it. Like, truly, the animal violence in Pet Sematary fit into the mood of the story. You could not have had Pet Sematary without animal violence. It all went together. I've read other books. For example, Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis has animal violence in it. And there was a reason for the animal violence. It all made sense. So I am not someone that just discounts a book just because an animal dies. Because people die too. You know, you can't discount a book just because death is a common thing. But I feel like it was just so pointless. And like, in a normal scenario, first of all, like, let the cat, like, write that the cat is somewhere else. Like, this cat had already survived so many other things that it would have been nice to see this character survive something else. It could have died later. There was a moment when they all fall out of the boat. It could have died then. Like, that would have made perfect sense. It just did not make sense that this evil character killed this cat for no reason. And it had to be the character's cat that had already lost everything. It was so stupid. So I know that was kind of ranty, but it really pissed me off. So that made me rate the book lower than what I would have. I actually gave it 3 stars, but I want to change my rating to 2 stars because the more I talk about it, the more I realize that the writing of this book, they relied a lot on cliches and a lot of things for effect. And I just didn't like it. Like, it didn't make sense. for him to do what he did. And there was other issues that I had with the book as well, but that was kind of my like final straw type thing. Because again, I don't have issues with animals dying if it makes sense to the plot, because animals die in real life, and realistic fiction, any fiction at all, is going to have animal death in it. But, and of course you can decide not to read that. I don't judge people for that. Like if you don't want to read that, I understand. But it just really pissed me off that it was used in that way. And even Nosferatu also has animal violence, and I didn't have an issue with it. It was just the way it was written in this book really pissed me off. So those are all the books that I read for April. Let me see how many I ended up reading. I ended up reading 11 books. I'm at 49 for the year. My goal on Goodreads is 90, but I would really like to read 120. So I'm getting there. If I can finish like 11 books this month, I'll be right in the halfway point, and I'm, next month will be June, so it will be right halfway. I'm moving in August, so I feel like I won't have as much time to read in August, so I want to make sure that I have a lot of books read before then. That's it. Thank you for sitting and talking my rant. I don't think I'm going to do a video about it since I ranted about it in here, but yeah, I really appreciate it. Stay tuned for next month, and I'll tell you what my May reads were. I don't do TBRs because I just like to, oh my god, I just like to read whatever. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.